In this video, I'm going to explain how you can create the best infantry division possible. And I'm going to explain two important principles that you need to know when designing your division. I will first start off with some division stats that you need to understand. Max speed is probably the most self-explanatory. It is the speed at which the division moves. 4 kilometers an hour is the lowest max speed a division can have, and is the speed of infantry and artillery in this game. Next are the hit points of the division. These are represented as HP and organization. HP is the hit points in terms of the physical equipment and manpower of the division. The lower the HP, the less equipment or men are left in the division, therefore they fight worse. The HP in the division template itself is the maximum amount of HP, while the HP in the division is represented by the orange bar you can see here. 0, the division loses the current battle. If it was attacking, it will stop attacking, and if it was defending, it will retreat into a nearby tile. Neither of these should be too low when designing your division. People will tell you hard limits that you should always follow, but there is no such thing. The best thing I could give you is never go below about 150 HP on your line divisions, and never below 25 organization. There are, of course, some exceptions, which is why I don't like giving hard limits. But it should give you a better idea of what you should be aiming for. Next comes probably the most important stat. This is soft attack. This is the attack the division deals in combat. Higher soft attack means you deal more damage per hour of combat. Soft attack will be far more important for you to learn as a beginner than hard attack is. Next are defense and breakthrough. To some of you this may come as a surprise because these two actually do the exact same thing, only in two different situations. Defense will block incoming attack when you are defending, while breakthrough will block incoming attack when you are attacking. Now this also may be surprising to some of you, because in every single battle, both sides both attack and defend. And as you can see in this battle, the attacking side has breakthrough as its defense value, while the defending side has the defense. At the bottom here, you will see the combat width. This is important because it measures how much space your division occupies in combat. Each battle has a certain amount of combat width, meaning that a larger division, meaning higher combat width, will fit less of these units than with a smaller division. Like in this battle right here, it is 160 combat width, meaning we fit 8 divisions that all are 20 combat width. When you mess around with your designer and you add more battalions, you may see that a lot of your stats are going up. But since the combat width is also going up, the size of your division is going up and you can fit less of these in combat. Meaning this quote-unquote boost to your division is completely artificial and doesn't necessarily always help you. So you need to be aware that when you're just adding more stuff, you aren't always making the division a better design. There's a much larger debate around which exact combat width you should use. Basically anything from 10 to 40 will work completely fine. Lastly, there's the production cost. This is kind of self-explanatory and is how expensive your division is to make. But more advanced, the number is based on how much a military factory can produce a day. You only need to worry about the number to the right. The production cost is most important when comparing one division to another. You also need to be aware that when comparing these two divisions' production cost, one division might have higher combat width and therefore might also have a higher production cost. This is not always the case, but it's still important for you to notice. Now I'll move on to the two principles. The first is what I like to call maximum damage. Simply put, it's the total damage that your division can output during a combat. It's the organization multiplied by the soft attack. What's important here is not the number itself, but understanding what this means for your divisions. What this means is that if you do too much of either organization or soft attack, you're losing out on the highest maximum damage you can obtain. Because a higher maximum damage is the best way to measure how effective your unit is in combat. This is why when I see a lot of people using a lot of line artillery, thinking that this division is purely better, that they are making a mistake. And here I have a good example. If you see here on the Google Sheets, you can see the different divisions and all of their stats. The first thing you might notice is that the soft attack increases by a lot when you add each line artillery. If you don't understand this, 9 represents the amount of infantry battalions in the division, while this 0 and the 1, 2, and 3 are the amount of artillery battalions. As you see, the soft attack goes up a significant amount, but also the organization goes down. Now when we put these two numbers together, you will see the maximum damage. Now the maximum damage also goes up, but we need to take into account the last thing, combat width. Because these divisions actually are larger for each extra artillery battalion we add. As you see here, the first one has 18 combat width, then it goes up to 21, 24, and 27. Now when we take the maximum damage into account with the combat width, we get this final number, the maximum damage per width. Maximum damage per width is probably the best way to see how good your division is. Now the first increase, going from a 9-0 to 9-1, is not insignificant. But the next one is a very small difference, and then going from a 9-2 to 9-3 is a negative difference. This means that adding this extra artillery battalion is actually a negative development, meaning that the extra artillery battalion is useless. A lot of pro players also don't like using any line artillery at all, and this is because you see the difference is so small. So the 9-0 actually does pretty well compared to these that have 1 or 2 line artillery. Especially this 9-2 is a very small increase from the 9-1. This also does not take into account the other weaknesses of line artillery, like for example the extra production cost. I might make another video on how overrated line artillery is, because a lot of people don't know how bad it actually is. The second principle is what I like to call specialization. I'll divide this into 3 parts, and it's meant to be in order from the biggest to the smallest mistake I see people make. The first is a mistake I see a lot of beginners make. This is putting fast battalions, like motorized, into an otherwise slow division. Contrary to what you might believe, this does not actually increase your speed at all. This is because the division's max speed is based on its slowest battalion. So adding this extra motorized battalion does not do anything to the speed. So I've seen several divisions that are designed this way, and here is an example. This is a low quality picture of a division that someone has made, and you can see here that they have a motorized infantry battalion here. And I believe this serves no purpose because it does not increase the max speed. You can see it's still on 4 kilometers an hour, and you can also see that it doesn't really do anything else to the division. If you do want faster divisions, what you should do instead is have some divisions that are slow and make a completely different division that has motorized. This way you do have some fast divisions while you still have the majority of your army as something that works really well. For a lot of noobs, it's better to stick to just slow, simple, quality infantry. The second part of specialization is about concentrating firepower. The theory goes that having a few really good divisions and the rest being barely able to hold a line is better than having a bunch of somewhat good divisions. The point is that with the few divisions, you can guarantee victory in those select battles, while the rest of your divisions can hold. For single player, you won't really see a difference, because you are likely battle planning the entire front line. But when you play multiplayer and your quote-unquote all-rounder divisions are unable to push, it is likely because your divisions are too weak to push your opponent's line, but his good divisions are fully capable of pushing yours. So don't be surprised when your 9-1 or 9-2 infantry is losing in multiplayer. The last part is about utilizing strengths. It's hard to do this with pure infantry, but when you start using special forces and tanks, this becomes more of an issue. You will have an issue if you try pushing with your Mountaineer Marine infantry combo, because even though special forces has higher base stats, they specialize in different types of terrain. Your Marines are best in naval invasions, while your Mountaineers are best in, well, mountains. You can also notice this when other people play. For example, I've seen several Dankus videos where he invades with Marines and then converts them to, for example, Mountaineers. Players can also, for example, land with Marines, pull in tanks from their own country, then pull out the Marines and naval invade somewhere else. This way they best utilize the strengths of each division. Making a mix of them will make them worse than if you just divided them into 2 different divisions. This is because if you have them in a different division, they will be better able to utilize their strengths. Now I'll move on to some example divisions. I've shown a couple of these through the video, but what is important here is that you do not copy everything. You should learn why rather than what. Also, you might note some specific combat widths that are more frequent than others, but you do not need to worry about the specifics here. Just know that people usually do anything from 12 to 36, and anything from 10 to 40 works perfectly fine. The first division is what I like to call a default infantry. This is because it's a very cheap infantry division that has decent soft attack, decent organization, and decent defense. This will work perfectly when you just try to hold the line. You could also be a bit fancy and try using a 9-1 and maybe even adding the engineer company, but then you are increasing the cost of the division by a significant amount. The next division is a port garrison. It's a bit smaller and doesn't have the support anti-air, but it still has the support artillery. This is because the support artillery gives a large amount of soft attack, so it's still useful even though you're just guarding the ports. You could also do engineer company, but it's a significant increase to your costs, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. The next division is a niche division. This is what I call the attack division, although I wouldn't recommend it necessarily for most people. This is because line artillery is again pretty bad, so this would for the most part work very early game before you unlock gun 2. This division is also 35 width, which means it fits perfectly into planes. The division has pretty good soft attack, a bit worse organization, but it still has enough defense and HP, so it's gonna still work completely fine. But it's more of an alternative to the next division, which is a mountain division. This is a lot better because mountaineer and special forces are better than normal infantry, and especially against a division that has line artillery like the previous one. So this division will get a lot more bonuses and do a lot more damage than other normal infantry divisions will do. This division also has the medium flame tank, which gives a lot of terrain bonuses. If you don't have no step back, you can't do the medium flame tank, so instead you can just do a normal recon company, or maybe even field hospital. Now you might notice that I'm not recommending you do any tanks here. This is because as a beginner you need to master the basics, and mastering infantry is pretty important. If you get really good with infantry, it's a lot easier for you to transition to other and more difficult strategies. Especially tanks, because I've seen a lot of people think they're doing everything right because they have tanks, they have planes, and they have ships. But in reality they're doing a lot of mistakes. So it's a lot better if you just learn infantry. You also don't need tanks because infantry with air is plenty already. Now this is my first video, so if you do have any feedback, please leave it in the comments. This is my first attempt.